Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Welcome to the virtual Mind Walks lecture series. My name is Monica Rutherford, and I'm with the Central Coast State Parks Association. We're the nonprofit that supports and funds educational programs in the state parks of San Luis Obispo County. And so the virtual Mind Walk series is a collaborative effort between our local state parks and us here at CSPA. And it is underwritten by the Thomas E. and Mary Kathryn Eltzroth Fund and supported by us here at CSPA. If you'd like to learn more about who CSPA is, you can visit that link on your screen, centralcoastparks.org. There are also some ways you can learn about ways you can support programs like this, as well as other educational programs in our state parks. Thank you again for being here. I'm going to do an introduction of our guest speakers today in just a moment, but just a couple of things about how today's presentation is going to work. It's going to last maybe 45 minutes to an hour at most, and you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. We will try to take questions as the program goes on, so if you type a question, our speakers will try to answer them as we go. Otherwise, you can always save your questions for the end as well. So if you find the Q&A box at the bottom, feel free to type your questions there as you think of them. And that is about it. If you have to leave early or if you want to let other folks know about this presentation, it will be recorded and posted on the State Parks YouTube page probably by next week or the following week. So I can put a link in the chat where you can find those videos. They're also found on the website shown on your screen. Alrighty, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Thank you again to everyone who's here. Today's virtual Mind Walk is titled Deep Dive into the Marine Protected Areas, or MPAs, of the San Luis Obispo Coast. And we have our amazing guest speakers here today, Erika Delemarre and Robin Hazard. Just a little bit about both of them. I'll start with Erika. Erika Delemarre has worked on marine conservation, environmental education, and youth development initiatives in countries such as Vietnam, Cambodia, Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, Palau, and Iceland. While working on and under the ocean, Erika has helped people of all ages discover and explore their unique connection with the ocean. Building stewardship through education, Erika believes together we can work to empower individuals and communities to reduce and reverse the damage that has been done to our global ocean. Erika holds a master's in marine biodiversity and conservation from Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego, and a Bachelor of Science in Public Relations from Northern Arizona University. She currently works as the Marine Protected Area Outreach and Education Project Coordinator for California State Parks, where she supports a statewide team of parks interpreters connecting students and park visitors to California's coasts and ocean. Thanks for being here, Erika. And
Thanks so much for having me.
One of those parks interpreters that she supports along the coast is Robin Hazard. And she is an MPA interpreter with California State Parks and works right here along the beautiful San Luis Obispo coast. And she's been here since 2018. She's been with State Parks for 6 years, beginning in Old Town San Diego State Historic Park. She works with children and adults alike to understand and explore the connection that all humans have with the ocean. She's received a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Anthropology and Sustainability from California State University, Northridge. You can almost always find her outside, whether in her garden in San Luis Obispo or backpacking through the Ansel Adams Wilderness. Thank you so much, both of you. I'm going to go ahead and pass this along to Erika.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having us. And hello, CSPA, all of those who have joined the call today. We're really excited to share with you. I'm going to go ahead and bring up some slides, and we're just going to do a dive into the marine protected areas of the San Luis Obispo coast. So before we get started, kind of the format of the presentation today is I'm going to give you a general overview of California's network of marine protected areas. And then I'll hand it over to Robin, and Robin's going to give more of that really localized information that's specific to your section of the coastline. As Monica mentioned, you're more than welcome to ask questions throughout. I'm actually going to remind myself right now, I opened the chat box, so I've got it up on my screen. So I'll try to answer your questions as they come in, but I've already told Monica she is welcome to interrupt me or Robin at any time if you all have questions. So we do encourage that. We'll also take questions at the end, but make sure to stick around to the end because we do have a really awesome and fun surprise for you. So please do hang around. And if you're tuning in and watching on YouTube and enjoying the recording, that's great. We're glad that you've joined as well. All right, so to get started, we're talking a lot about marine protected areas, but we need to establish what marine protected areas actually are. So they are areas in the ocean, sometimes in estuaries, that are created to ensure conservation and sustainability of marine resources for the future. So we're looking at really stabilizing habitats and allowing species to increase in abundance or the quantity of animals that live there, as well as the biodiversity. So having a very diverse community. As we all know about our communities here on land, the more diverse our communities are, the more perspectives you have, the more range of talent and knowledge and cultural backgrounds, the stronger our communities are here in our human communities. And the same goes in the ocean. When we have biodiversity or a community filled with a lot of different species playing different roles in these ecosystems, it makes it really healthy and resilient. So that's one of the ways that MPAs support our healthy ocean. Now, MPAs protect a variety of habitats, and this is an illustration that was created by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And you can see quite a few of these habitats are what we have along the California coastline. So starting up on shore, you all are very familiar with the estuary, I'm sure, at the head of Morro Bay, going into sandy beaches and the intertidal, and then rocky reefs, kelp forest, soft sandy ocean bottoms, and then submarine canyons or underwater canyons. So all of these different habitats support a variety of different types of species and also species in different life stages. So there are a lot of animals that will move between estuaries and coastal zones and even out into the open ocean throughout their lifetime. And so through those different life stages, it's important that we have these different protected habitats to allow those species to be protected and thrive and grow in those different stages so they can eventually get to the point where they reproduce. Speaking of reproduction, I would like to introduce you to the concept of a BOF, or a big, old, fertile female fish. Now, as you can see here, looking at the fish across your screen, the one over on the left-hand side is a smaller and younger one at only 14 inches. And that vermilion rockfish has the ability to produce only 150,000 offspring each time it reproduces. As that fish grows in age and size, it can actually produce more offspring. You can see all the way on the right-hand side, a fish that is about twice the size of the younger one can produce 1.7 million offspring. So you can see that really big difference. And this is one of the benefits of our marine protected areas. They protect spaces from fishing, so species can get older and have the ability to reproduce at those higher quantities. So why should we all care about MPAs? That's a really big and important question. And we've got a couple of them up on screen. So number one, fish populations worldwide are in decline. And it's not just fish, it's also other animals in the sea that we rely on for seafood. For many, many years in history, the ocean was seen as a limitless resource that we could just take as much as we wanted and there would always be more. But things have gotten a little out of balance. Human populations, of course, have grown. And on top of that, we're just feeding crazy, like we're just taking too much out of the ocean. Sorry, I don't have good words for it, but we're just taking too much out. And so with those declining fish populations, we really need to look at ways that we can help balance them and find that good equilibrium with what we take out of the sea. And marine protected areas are one of the great ways to kind of restrict that take. Now, as I mentioned, marine protected areas increase the biodiversity or the variety of animals and wildlife that are present. Now, think about the Morro Bay Estuary and Morro Bay as a whole. there are a lot of animals there, and it's not just all about fish and fishing, but the amount of wildlife that's supported, from the fish and the invertebrates into the otters and the seabirds. We love to go and enjoy these places because of that wide biodiversity. But the important thing too is these healthy ecosystems that have wide biodiversity, they are going to be more balanced and more resilient, especially in the face of climate change. Climate change is really changing our ocean in a lot of ways. The two main ways is through changing temperatures. So the ocean temperature overall is increasing in most parts of the planet. And the ocean is also changing in its pH, so it's becoming more acidic. These changing conditions, including oxygen loss, can really impact marine ecosystems. And when you've got these ecosystems that are protected and they're allowed to be a little more in balance, they can be more resilient against those impacts of climate change. Now, you'll notice here we did put a little note at the bottom of the screen how Morro Bay State Marine Reserve protects important eelgrass habitat, which is a nursery for a lot of local fish. And of course, if there's a nursery of local fish, that's what's bringing in the seabirds. Those seabirds and those otters that are feeding in the estuary, of course, brings in a lot of tourism for wildlife watching. So it's all connected when it comes to the health and well-being of not only the people who might be collecting some of these seafood resources, but also the people who are coming to support the local economy through ecotourism like wildlife watching. All right, and of course, lastly, and this is a picture of Robin, who you're going to get to speak to in a few minutes. MPAs are a great place to play. Most MPAs are 100% open to all types of recreation. So you're able to go and enjoy the wildlife and enjoy these beautiful and balanced ecosystems and habitats because they are protected. And just like our California state parks belong to you, our marine protected areas also belong to you. All right, so you all may have heard of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Now, this is a national marine protected area. It's designated by the federal government. It's in our federal waters, and you can see the outline of the map of it here. It starts just south of the Golden Gate up near San Francisco. It extends down past Monterey Bay, where I am right now, all the way down toward where you all are in Cambria. So this National Marine Sanctuary was established in 1992, and it's often been called the Serengeti of the sea. And again, it goes back to the amount of wildlife that is supported in this really big space. The National Marine Sanctuaries primarily are going to protect areas from oil and gas exploration and extraction. So oil drilling is obviously, risky for our coastline and ocean, but even the exploration of these things, using really loud blasts of sound underwater can be really damaging, not only to marine mammals, but even small invertebrates. Recent studies have shown that oil and gas exploration can even harm plankton and just kill plankton within miles range of it happening. So our National Marine Sanctuaries, again, federal waters, it's comparable to what you might consider a national park or a national forest, where there's restrictions for the types of behaviors you can do on those national lands. Now, here in California, we've got our network of state marine protected areas. It's a network of 124 of them. They are in our state waters, so California state waters, and they are managed by California Department of Fish and Wildlife, which is one of State Parks' sister agencies. 16% of California's coastal waters are protected by our MPAs. And some of you may have been familiar, or you've heard about the governor's 30 by 30 initiative, protecting 30% of California's lands and waterways by 2030. Our California marine protected areas play a really key role in that. Now, 35 of the MPAs in this network are adjacent to 42 of our state parks. So that is why Robin and I have the jobs that we do. We have interpreters up and down the California coast who are providing education and outreach for park visitors, K-12 students, to help them understand that the protections that you see in your state park, in a lot of cases, they extend into the water nearby in the marine protected area. Of course, they are different types of protections, but it's a similar concept. These are waters that are regulated and managed by the state of California. And just like you couldn't walk into a state park and cut down a tree or go hunting in a lot of cases. There are restrictions within our state our state MPAs, a variety of different types of rules and regulations, and that's what we're going to help kind of break down for you in the next few slides. Now, we are focusing on where you are here in San Luis Obispo County. You can see that you've got 3 SMCAs and SMRs and SMRAMAs and SMPs. What are all these things? Well, this is where we're going to break it down, because these different designations, of course, come with different rules, and sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. So here are 3 of the main ones. Number 1, our state marine reserves. They're always labeled on the map as red, and you can imagine the red as a big stop sign. Our state marine reserves mean no take. So you cannot take by going fishing. Take is of course, it means, you can see at the bottom of the screen, to hunt, pursue, catch, capture, kill fish, mollusks, or crustaceans, or attempting to do so. So in our state marine reserves, you can't actively hunt and gather or fish. But additionally, if you're walking down the shoreline, you can't pick up the shells or the driftwood or the seaweed to take it home. In our state marine reserves, we leave everything intact. So that's a really important one to know about. Now, one of the other more common ones are the state marine conservation areas. And those are areas where you can take certain amounts of species, and the take is generally recreationally, sometimes commercially. It varies by protection. But again, there's a lot of limits to it versus if you were fishing or hunting and collecting in areas that were not protected. Now, our multi-use area national marine sanctuaries, of course, those were the ones that we talked about. The Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, that is the big, broader one. And that does allow take of most species recreationally and commercially with a license. So those are the areas that are not in our MPAs, but is still off the shore of where you all are, because it's in the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Now, you'll see in all of these things, the things that you can do in your marine protected areas. You can swim and dive and surf and snorkel and kayak and tide pool and explore. You can wildlife watch. You can go and do photography. You can go and take a nap on the beach. There are a lot of things that you can do in your MPA to enjoy it, but really what the limits are is just on that extractive use. So coastal recreational opportunities. For those of you who are local on the slow coast, you're probably familiar with some of these activities, and that includes wildlife watching, fishing, and surfing. And you can see that we've listed some of the marine protected areas there that are popular for doing some of these activities. Another couple of things to do: diving, tide pooling, and of course, kayaking. And it's funny because this photo says kayaking, but it shows pictures of otters on the water. We do know that kayaking is one of the big draws at Morro Bay, but especially to get a good look at the southern sea otters that live in the area. And Robin's going to touch on that in a little bit, because yes, of course, you can go out and enjoy this wildlife, but it's important to know how to be respectful of them. So before we dive in, we're going to take a deep breath, because Robin is going to go into the very, very particular specifics of the different types of protections that these MPAs offer. But before we do that, we need to be thinking about why these places are so important beyond seafood and beyond, being able to go and recreate and have fun. But we also need to be thinking about the basics of human and all life on planet Earth, all of our existence. It comes down to oxygen. It's one of the key things that we all need to survive. And many of you may not be aware, but the ocean produces more than 50% of the oxygen in our atmosphere. The oxygen that we rely on to breathe, many things on planet Earth rely on to breathe. So I'd like to ask you all to join me in a little breathing exercise before we do this deep dive. We're going to take 2 big, deep breaths. And after that second breath, we are going to say, thank you, ocean. So you're lucky, your cameras are off. I'm not going to see or hear you doing it, but I'd like you to join me. Robin's back on screen, so she's also going to take a nice big deep breath with me. And we're going to do 2 in a row. Ready? Let's do a big inhale and exhale. Again, inhale And exhale. And thank you, ocean. Every other breath you take, you can say thank you, ocean. And that's not only when you're living on the coastline, but if you are hundreds, if not thousands of miles from the ocean, you know that you can thank the ocean for every other breath you take. And that's a reminder for me sometimes when I'm too far from the coastline and I start to feel, bothered that the ocean is too far away. I know that I can just take some deep breaths, and I know the ocean is always with me. All right, so I am going to hand it over to Robin now. And Monica, if you can go ahead and spotlight her video, I'll keep the slideshow up on this side.
Hello, everyone. My name is Robin Hazard, and I'm a California State Park interpreter, like Monica had mentioned, and I specifically focus on interpreting marine protected areas. And like Erika said, we're going to dive deep into our local MPAs. So here on the San Luis Obispo coast, we actually have 8 MPAs with different levels of protection. I like to think of them like flavors, different flavors that we've got here. So that some prohibit the disturbance of any marine resource, while others allow the take of a particular species. And so each habitat, each MPA is completely different, and their placement is completely purposeful too, to help different species thrive, while others, if they're already abundant, we're able to take those. So we're going top to bottom here along the San Luis Obispo coast. Again, we have 8. Starting at the very top, we have Pedersblonkis, and it cruises all the way down the coast, past Monterey to Morrow State Park at Point Bichon. And we've got a little video to share with you guys, starting some information on the Pedersblonkis MPAs, as well as the Cambria State Marine Park.
Marine protected areas are like state parks or national parks. They're areas that are set aside for the environment to grow and become more established and become more pristine.
We need to provide areas where fish can reproduce. And when fish reproduce, the larva that they create travels in the current. It was decided that a network of space marine protected areas would allow that larva to travel in between and really fertilize the entire stretch of coast. I think it's important for people to understand that a marine protected area, while it does have specific regulations and a certain standing under the law, this is a state marine park, and it is accessible to anyone who wants to come and visit. As long as they obey the rules, they're more than welcome. But it is the furthest thing from a closed area. It is open for everyone to enjoy, and I hope people take advantage of it.
Pedersblonkis is a spectacular spot. There's all kinds of birds to look at. There are all kinds of marine mammals to see, both on land and offshore. And you can swim, you could kayak, you could surf, do all those things here. And the thing to keep in mind is that when you're looking at wildlife, you're going to see more of it, because the marine protected areas will allow for a number of animals to grow in population and diversity.
If you come to Pedersblonkis, it's hard to imagine the sight that you'll see, because there are so many seals. I mean, literally thousands of seals on the beach right now. It's an animal that has come back from near extinction, and that's something to celebrate. And this is the largest mainland colony, and it's the easiest one to get to see since it's right next to the highway.
The exciting thing about the Cambria State Marine Park is that it is accessible for recreational fishing. Leffingwell Point blocks the prevailing northwest wind and northwest swell and allows for safe and easy access for kayakers, for aluminum boats, for inflatable boats. There's huge kelp beds both to the north, to the south. There's rocky habitat straight out in front. There's Cambria Rock, which you can see in the distance. And if you're an avid fisherman, there's no better place to be. The park is also open for people interested in tide pooling and looking at resources. There's an abundance of life in all of these tide pools and in the near shore. Adjacent to the State Marine Park is a boardwalk that runs the entire length of Moonstone Beach Drive. We live in a state that's popular and attracts millions of people, but there's only so much coastline. And if we want to have that coastline with the same rich abundance that we have today in the future, something has to be done to help protect it. And this is one way of doing that. Allows you access, allows you to get up close and personal. You can get out in the water. You can see the otters next to you in your kayak. You can look down and see fish, but you also leave some for future generations.
So that was a great overview of the top two MPAs that we have along our central California coast, so mainly the San Luis Obispo County area. So the first ones we have at the very tippity top, if you're familiar with the light station, the Pedersblonkis light station, that's actually adjacent to these waters. We have a state marine reserve and a state marine conservation area. And so like Erika mentioned earlier, you're always going to see that state marine reserve in red. So that just means no take or damage of any living, geological, or cultural marine resource. And then just off the coast, beyond the state marine reserve, we have a state marine conservation area. And so there's some limited take there. So you're able to go out on a boat and do some boat fishing that way. As we cruise, or we're still in the state marine reserve and state marine conservation area at Pedersblonkis. And as mentioned, there's a lot to see there. So again, we've got that light station, and all along that light station and all along San Simeon State Park, there is the Pedersblonkis elephant seal rookery. So this is a great spot, one of the only places in the world, I believe, where you can see this many animals, and it's this accessible because it's right off the highway, as mentioned in the video. And so this is a wonderful spot to recreate responsibly. So you can see these animals up close, of course, not too close, but from the boardwalk that they've got there. And we've also got the Moonstone boardwalk, and that's going to be adjacent to the next MPA that I'm talking about. As we cruise down the coast, we have the Cambria State Marine Park and the Cambria State Marine Conservation Area. So what's really special about this particular area, the State Marine Conservation Area / State Marine Park, is that it's the only one of its kind here in California, which is really, really cool that we can kind of say that we're lucky enough to have that here, just, in our backyard, right on our coastline here. And a state marine park is essentially, just like all other MPAs, it's much like an underwater park. So there's a lot to do there. Recreational take is allowed, and there's no damage, again, no damage of any kind, living, geological, or cultural. And then just below the Cambria State Marine Park, we have the White Rock State Marine Conservation Area, and commercial take of giant and bull kelp is allowed with a valid license. This MPA is actually the only MPA that doesn't parallel a state park here along our coastline, with the exception of Point Bichon, but I still consider that adjacent because it's very, very close. It's just kitty corner. But if we keep cruising down, we'll see a little bit more about the State Marine Conservation Area. It was established as protection from commercial fishing, interest of recreational fishing. And if you heard in the video, there's actually a location called Leffingwell Landing. And it's a very popular spot to launch a kayak. So if you're a spearfisherman, spearfisherwoman, you're able to launch there. And there's the kelp forest is just offshore there. And it's a wonderful place. Even if you're snorkeling, it's a great spot to launch, get out via shore. So it's really easily accessible for people. And there's also that boardwalk that goes along this entire area. So even if you don't want to get your feet dirty, you don't want to get your toes in the sand, you don't even want to get wet at all, you can still enjoy this marine protected area just by simply having a lovely stroll along the boardwalk. So it's really accessible for a lot of different personalities. And again, it's really special because it's the only one of its kind here in California. So out of all of California's 124 marine protected areas, we are lucky enough to say that we have the only state marine park. Whoop, whoop. So just below the Cambria State Marine Park, we have the White Rock State Marine Conservation Area. And like I said, it's the only one that we don't parallel. State Park does not parallel this, but it's a wonderful spot. It's really, really remote, usually accessed only by boat, and seaweed foraging is allowed off of this MPA. Cruising down the coast, Erika mentioned Morro Bay earlier, and Morro Bay actually has 2 marine protected areas. One, again, you can see that big red blob there towards the back bay of Moro Bay, and that's a state marine reserve, so no take or damage of any living, geological, or cultural marine resource. So we're leaving it just as is. And then we have the majority of it is actually a big green blob, and that big green blob I like to call a SMRMA. It's a State Marine Recreational Management Area. Again, SMRMA for short. And this is a pretty unique spot because there's not really, again, anything like this along the California coast, because the take of finfish is allowed. That includes sharks and rays and skates. And we also have aquaculture of oysters in Morro Bay, which is really neat. We have 2 different farms out there. So if you've ever visited Morro Bay and you've seen something floating out in the distance, 2 different structures, kind of towards the sand spit and towards the back bay, there's 2 different ones. That's actually aquaculture, they're oyster farming. And then of course the dredging of the bay that happens once a year. So there's certain exceptions to each MPA, and these are some of the exceptions to this particular MPA. And it's a great spot. It's a beautiful area. Anybody who's visited can tell you. And there's a lot of neat levels of protection here on this particular MPA, because we have it as part of the Pacific Flyway. It's actually designated as an important bird area. It's a really important stopover for migratory birds. So resting and foraging migratory birds, they stop here because they know that they have shelter, they know that they have resources and food available to them here. So you can imagine on really, really long road trips, you're traveling across the country to go see family or something, those gas station stops and pit stops are pretty important. You need to refuel, you need to empty, you need to do whatever it is that you need to do. And these birds are the same. They're flying all the way from Alaska down to Baja. And so they rely on these thriving ecosystems to feed them, to nurture them, to allow them to rest. So it's important that we keep it the way that it is for these important migratory bird highways. If we keep scrolling, next slide, we can see down south, and again, this is where I said it's a little wonky here. We have Montana de Oro State Park is just north of the Point Bichon MPAs. You can see Erika's mouse there. So I still consider it kind of adjacent waters here. We actually, we use this as an area. So if you are on the land of Montana de Oro State Park, you can actually see Point Bichon very, very clearly. So I consider it the same. And it's very similar to Pedersblonkis' MPA, because we have a state marine reserve, again, that big red area just offshore, so no take of any kind whatsoever. And then beyond that, we have a state marine conservation area. So a lot of people will go out here and do some fishing. And it's a beautiful area. It's super remote. And the ecology of the underwater, under the waves, it's very unique. We've got some underwater canyons there. We've got stacks and pinnacles. We've got kelp forest. We've got lots of, up and down our entire coast, we have a lot of marine mammals that use this and rely on this area. It's also a popular surf spot. So recreation and wildlife occurs throughout all of these 8 MPAs. It's very, very prevalent. And if we keep scrolling down, we have another video showing you a little bit more about these southern MPAs. So we have one in Morro Bay again and Point Bichon.
We're at the Point Bichon State Marine Reserve, just off the Central California coast. This reserve was established in 2007 as part of the Marine Life Protection Act. The Marine Life Protection Act established reserves up and down the coast. Over 100 MPAs have been established between the Mexican and the Oregon border. The MPAs can act as seed populations, so where you have a protected population, that population grows in abundance. Also, the individuals tend to get much larger, and when we're talking about fish, the larger fish are the ones that are producing the greatest amount of offspring. Those will spill over into adjacent areas. The Point Bichon State Marine Reserve is a no-take reserve, which means you can't take anything out of the reserve. But that doesn't mean that we can't appreciate the reserve and enjoy the reserve as a recreational place. You can still kayak, you can still dive, you can hike along the trails along the coast. You have a diversity of habitats, you have a lot of kelp off the coast here, and there's a high abundance of seabirds breeding in this particular marine protected area. But you just want to be mindful of the marine life. So if you see that the marine life is reacting to your presence, maybe step back and enjoy from a distance.
The Morro Bay Estuary is a unique place where two creeks come down and collide with the ocean. And because of the sand spit here, it creates a very calm, unique place for diverse wildlife of all sorts. If you have the opportunity, this is an excellent place to learn how to kayak. It's protected, it's calm. We have great guides who will take you through the experience.
You know, out on Morro Bay, there's so much wildlife. Right now, we've got a group of pelicans that are in the distance, brown pelicans. There's so many birds here on the bay. And also there are so many marine mammals in the bay. The harbor seals, sea otters will come through this portion of the bay. We have sea lions that are very active. And the thing that always gets me about coming out on the water is it's always different. Literally every single time you've got different tidal levels going on. You've got different wildlife sightings happening. You've got different weather patterns. So there's always something going on here in Morro Bay. And that's one of the reasons why I love coming out in the water so much.
One thing that people might not understand about this marine protected area is that it doesn't mean off limits. It doesn't mean you can't come here. It doesn't mean you have to whisper when you come here. You can just come and play and see this diversity. And overall, it's just the serenity and peacefulness here that is so unique. But at the same time, it's accessible. I didn't have to backpack 20 miles in to see this. I can come and enjoy this every day.
Our planet is rapidly changing, and it's important that we provide time and space for these organisms to adapt to that change so that they can continue to thrive in the future. The MPAs are just another tool that we have that allow us to provide a little bit more protection, allow us to give organisms that time to adapt to our rapidly changing planet.
So you may notice a theme here that there's a lot of recreation going along our coastline, which is fabulous. I love to recreate along the coast and anywhere really, but we also have a lot of wildlife too. So how do we balance the two? And to keep it short, I have more slides to show you, but if you see a wild animal looking at you, it shows that you're a little too close, and backing up is simply the best thing that you can do. So for example, here we've got some sea otters, and you can see them all looking at the camera. And it's a weird thing to shift your brain even before, you know, I worked here at state parks. It was something I never really thought about, but if you see, you know, a postcard or a magnet or, you know, these different things, and an animal is looking at you, whether it be a bobcat or a sea otter or whatever it is, that animal is actually disturbed. And a lot of people don't have that frame of mind. And so it's funny when you first learn it, because every time you see anything with a wild animal looking at you, it kind of shows you, oh, these animals are actually alert. And when they're alert, they're actually expending extra energy that they could otherwise be putting that energy towards getting food or resting. For the sea otters that we have here in Morro Bay, that a lot of them are actually nursing mothers, and a female is almost in a constant state of motherhood. And so they are extremely busy, not only getting enough food for themselves, getting enough rest for themselves, but also for their young pups. So again, when wildlife watching, just have some, you know, mindset of their perspective. And if an animal is looking at you, you just back up a little bit, use some binoculars, use a zoom lens if you're a photographer. And we have a fun little video, another one, it's short, I promise, to share with you on this.
Oh my gosh, look, it's an otter. Let's go touch it. That's our distance. Keep your distance.
So that was actually created by some Cal Poly students. Oh, let's watch it again. No, I'm just kidding. Sea otters are obviously not the only animal that we have here along the San Luis Obispo coast. We have a lot of birds. I mentioned that earlier, talking about migratory birds, and the same thing goes for birds. And it's very common to see kids, especially, and kids are kids, so they're going to run through a flock of gulls and whatnot. But just being mindful of those things. If your dog is doing it, maybe dogs are supposed to be on leash in that particular beach. That may be why. In order to protect these birds' energy, again, a lot of them are traveling from really, really far distances and having to have a full flesh, which means that all of these birds are flying at the same time. That expends a lot of extra energy. Maybe they were resting, maybe they were foraging. So just being mindful of the wildlife, remembering that this is their neighborhood, this is their home. And just like you in your neighborhood, in your home, if you've got some intruders, maybe someone's walking through your living room while you're watching dinner or watching TV and eating dinner in the evening, it would be a little alarming if someone were to walk into your house and maybe even run into your house and go, ah. So, and that these birds, they have that same perspective. So just being really mindful of how we act in these wild spaces, because they're homes to lots of animals. And again, not just birds, but tide pool etiquette. Tide pooling is awesome. And I love taking kids out in tide pools. I love taking adults out into tide pools, but just being mindful, again, stepping carefully, making sure to leave everything where it's at, picking up a crab even, and dropping it into another pool can be extremely shocking to that animal. So, if you do choose to pick it up, make sure to do it very carefully and gently, and putting it back directly where its home is, whatever pool it may have been in. And of course, removing trash. If we're entering a space, leaving it better than we found it is always a good practice. And again, giving animals space, because in tide pools, a lot of marine mammals are out there. Harbor seals love to haul out in tide pool areas and on rocks, so making sure to give them space. And if you are kayaking, a good rule of thumb is 5 kayak lengths away. If you are on land, remaining 50 yards away from sea otters, sea lions, and seals, that's a good rule of thumb. But again, it's really hard to measure that, and a lot of people don't have that spatial awareness, myself included. And so if you see that animal looking at you, then simply just back up and really use the cues from that animal. And I think this is Erika. Yes, Erika, take it away.
Yeah, well, both Robin and I are going to share some ways that you all can get involved with your local marine protected areas there on the slow coast. So one of the first things that you might be interested in doing, and this presentation will serve as a springboard into this, is you can become a certified marine protected area ambassador. So there are trainings that were developed by the Marine Protected Area Collaborative Network, and there are trainings that are split into North, Central, and Southern coasts. And so if you're located on the slow coast, you of course want to do this Central Coast training. It is a totally free training, but it's going to go into deeper facts and information than what we are covering with you today. You might also hear a lot of stuff that we have shared, but you'll come out of it ready to do marine protected area outreach, whether you are working for a nonprofit organization, or maybe you're working as an educator, maybe you're volunteering with state parks as one of our docents. Completing this Marine Protected Area Ambassador training is a great way to really get a foundational understanding of MPAs so that you can speak confidently about them. The other one is Marine Protected Area, or MPA Watch. This is a statewide program that State Parks participates in, where we have volunteers that go out and monitor the human use and human activities in our marine protected areas. So there in Slow Coast, Robin Hazard is our MPA point person, our MPA watch point person. And she's been helping conduct trainings and get volunteers up to speed. And really what's happening here is not only State Parks volunteers, but volunteers of these other organizations on screen are collecting this data and getting an understanding of how people use our marine protected areas. Are they coming here and following the rules, or are they coming to the MPAs and breaking the rules? There's a lot of information that we can take and really take that data and start to understand trends, whether that is, we know certain times of year where one area or another might get an extra amount of visitation. And during those times, if there's a lot of visitation, but it's also a lot of activity happening like accidental take or poaching, where people are illegally taking species out of places like state marine reserves. When we collect that data, that can really inform the management. So sharing that with state parks, sharing that with Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so when we know that there's a hot spot that happens at a certain time of year, we can ensure that there are more people out to do outreach education and or enforcement. So MPA Watch is a great organization, a great project that you can get involved with. And you can volunteer as a state parks docent with this project. Another way, I did mention the MPA Collaborative Network. There is the local county-based San Luis Obispo MPA Collaborative. This is a collection of everything from agencies and organizations to fisher people to tribal members to even just concerned citizens who care about their local coastline. You are welcome and invited to join your local San Luis Obispo MPA Collaborative meeting. The meetings are hosted quarterly, so generally once every 3 months. A lot of MPA collaboratives up and down the coast, they're in every single county. Most of them right now are either still doing meetings on Zoom or offering hybrid options, so you can meet in person or online. But I know that Robin is also engaged in the local MPA collaborative, so if you have questions on how to join and get involved, she can certainly help you with that as well. All right, I do want to hand this part over to Robin because this is her baby. She is very much involved in Sea Life Stewards.
Yeah, so this is a program, a California State Park volunteer program called Sea Life Stewards. And I'm the volunteer coordinator. So if you enjoy kayaking in Morro Bay and having the kayaks supplied to you, I am your go-to girl. If you enjoy wildlife and enjoy talking to visitors as well, this is an excellent program. It's a water-based program. We do offer kayaks. If you have a stand-up paddle board, you're welcome to bring that as well. And we also have land options too. So sometimes the weather's not great, it's too windy, whatever it may be, we have an option to do a land shift if you've already made the trek out there to do a shift. This program typically runs from Memorial Day to Labor Day. A lot of times we go and extend it even until October because the weather is phenomenal. And you basically serve as a naturalist out on the water of Morro Bay. We talked about recreation being extremely popular, as well as there being a lot of wildlife. So Morro Bay is actually what's called a biodiversity, or I'm sorry, disturbance hotspot, excuse me. It's called a disturbance hotspot because we have so much recreation and we have so much wildlife. And unfortunately, that leads to some disturbance of wildlife. And so this program was created to mitigate that. And not only are you reducing disturbance of wildlife, but you're also enhancing the visitor's experience. So a lot of people are visiting from who knows where. It could be from across the country, it could be from another country, it could be from Central California in the San Joaquin Valley. And maybe they've never seen a certain animal before, or they're curious why the tide is moving a certain way, or why does the fog always come in at the certain time when it's 107 at home? And so you kind of serve as that go-to person. You have some sort of sign, a state park emblem on you. And so you serve as that person to answer those questions, be that friendly face, but also share some knowledge about how to respectfully recreate in these areas. And then these are some simple resources that can help you get more familiar with not only recreating responsibly, but also eating responsibly, as well as my personal favorite here is iNaturalist. I use iNaturalist almost every single day. If you see a leaf, if you see a sea anemone, if you see anything that you've never seen before, take a picture of it, throw it in iNaturalist, and the wonderful folks at Cal Academy of Science will kindly let you know. It's not always immediate. Sometimes it's very far in the future, but it's a wonderful app and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, while we are on the screen, I wanted to kind of just, especially with Seafood Watch and CalTip, just share a little bit of extra information. Seafood Watch, though for a while it was an app, they are now moving to just like a mobile-based website, but it's the same function where basically it helps you understand what seafood you're eating and whether it is sustainable or not. We spoke earlier about how world fish populations are in decline because of overfishing. The Seafood Watch program, it's run by the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and the scientists there, what they're doing is kind of rating and scoring different types of seafood depending on a lot of different factors, with like what kind of equipment was it used when it was gathered? Does that equipment cause a lot of bycatch or incidental catch of species that aren't the target species? How much transportation is involved in getting the seafood across the planet to wherever you are? So a lot of different things are taken into consideration, and they use a very simple red light, yellow light, green light. So the fish species and the seafood species that have the red symbol on them are the ones that you should avoid. The yellow ones are like, try to avoid it, but it's a good option. And then the green, the ones that are categorized as green are the ones that are a good choice. So the Seafood Watch app is great to have in your pocket when you're going to, say, your local seafood market, or even the grocery store to pick up some fillets, or even going to your favorite restaurant or sushi bar. So look at what you're ordering and then have a look on the Seafood Watch website to see if it is a smart choice or not, and whether it's going to help support healthy ocean ecosystems. The other one that's really important to look at is the CalTip app. And we haven't dived too deep into that, but CalTip stands for Californians Turning in Poachers and Polluters. So CalTip has a hotline, a 1-800 number hotline. Maybe Monica or Robin, you can look that up and put the CalTip hotline in the chat. We'll have it in a slide at the very end of the presentation. But the CalTip app allows you to submit anonymous apps of folks potentially poaching or polluting in marine protected areas. So you can not only write what you are seeing, but you can also take and submit photographs of what you're seeing. That is particularly helpful if there is a boat that is obviously fishing in an area where it's not allowed, or maybe, you know, I've used it where I saw someone bringing back buckets of mussels from a state marine reserve here in Monterey, and I took photos of their car and their license plate while they were not looking, and I submitted that anonymous tip in through the CalTip app. If you are seeing something that is a big take, you know, big poaching happening, don't use the app, but call the hotline. Monica just put it into the chat. That is a great number to have on your phone. So if you see something, you can report it in real time. The hotline has the most, like the quickest response. And often they will have an officer from Department of Fish and Wildlife call you back to get information. A lot of you who may be volunteers or docents in state parks, there's also your state parks rangers you can reach out to. So call the ranger on duty. Regardless of what you do, we would say number one, always call the CalTip hotline. Again, that helps us identify hotspots, and really that information is compiled over time. And if they're seeing repeated instances of illegal activities in certain areas, that's what will really flag the spot for Department of Fish and Wildlife to step up enforcement in a certain area. But the hotline is the first one, and then the app is the second one in your choices, which one to do first. So sorry, just want to add that extra stuff on to what Robin was sharing. And then Robin, do you want to talk about the last app we wanted to share?
Sure. So the last app is another one that I truly love because I am a map geek. It's called Fish Legal. And it's really neat because you can see where you are in proximity to the MPA. So for example, here, I took this screenshot on my phone while I was standing in the Morro Bay Natural History Museum. And you can see where the MPAs are in proximity to me. You can see that, again, that red blob, that's the State Marine Reserve. And you can see the green blob, which is the SMRMA, the State Marine Recreational Management Area. And you can even click on those MPAs as well, and it will let you know more details. There's a lot of really neat things that I haven't even delved into with this app. I know that there's some fish ID capabilities on here as well. So there's a lot of really neat things that you can do. Obviously, this was primarily created for people who are fishing, and that's a great resource for them. But for us as well, it lets us know, again, regarding what Erika was saying about CalTIP, if you see something funny happening and you're not quite sure if it's an MPA, you can pull up Fish Legal and see exactly where the boundaries are, and even what is allowed to be taken. If there's no take whatsoever, you can really hone in on what's actually happening and just be more familiar with your surroundings. It's really easy to designate certain, state parks, and you have signs and boundaries and all kinds of things, but for water, it gets a little wonky. It's hard to put up, walls and fences and signs and whatnot around an MPA. So it's really nice that we have this app available to us.
Yeah, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife also has a mobile website that you can access from the CDFW website that does a similar function. And the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's mobile app will have the most current and accurate and updated regulations if anything changes. The Fish Legal app is not operated by Department of Fish and Wildlife, though the developers work to keep things updated. So you do have a couple of different resources you can access using your phone to make sure that you know the rules of the area that you're in. I know that personally, if I'm out in the field and I recognize an incident taking place and I want to approach someone about it, I will often demonstrate the app to them on the phone and show them, like, this is something free that you can download, and you can utilize this when you do want to go out fishing to make sure that you're not going into a place where it's prohibited. This is a good slide to take a photo of. So for those of you who are still hanging with us, I know we're coming up on our hour here. I would encourage you to take a picture of this page. We can also make these slides available through Monica afterwards if you'd like to grab some of these phone numbers. Obviously, there are a lot of different numbers, and sometimes I know in certain instances, people will just do the knee-jerk reaction of like, who do I call? I'm just going to call 911 and the police will tell me. Sometimes it's easier to really have, like, in your phone book, who I should report these things to. So instead of just, writing down, for instance, Pacific Wildlife Care, like, I'll put in the notes and the contact, dead marine mammal. And then that way, when I look into my contacts, I can just search mammal in my contact list on my phone, and that one will come up. So just little tips and tricks so that when you're out being the eyes and the ears on the coastline, the observations that you make can be used in so many different ways, and they can be helpful and beneficial to the wildlife out here. All right. I think we're wrapping up now. I have not seen any questions come in through the chat throughout, but I do want to take a moment. I did tempt you all with a little surprise at the end, so we're not quite there yet. We have one last surprise, but I did want to give everyone a moment to ask any questions or make any comments that Robin and I might be able to address for you.
We did have one question come through. Oh, there we go. We got another one. We have a question from Patty. With climate change, will more protections be added to each of the entities described?
That is a really great question. So our network of marine protected areas was finalized and finished in 2012. So this is actually our 10-year anniversary of our marine protected areas. And right now, Department of Fish and Wildlife and state parks and California Natural Resources Agency as a whole are working on what is called the MPA Decadal Review. So we are working to really look on the last 10 years to see, have our MPAs worked? Are we seeing that increase in abundance and increase in biodiversity? And so far, the science is pointing in the direction that it is working. Now, when we say in the face of climate change is already happening. And so we are working to address climate change in different ways. At this time, there are no plans to expand California's network of marine protected areas. Even in the governor's 30 by 30 initiative, there is nothing saying that we are going to create more marine protected areas. But really what a focus is on right now is making sure that we have the science, because it takes a while for habitats to grow and change and rebound after they are protected. But once we have the science, that can really inform changes to policy, and whether that's the expansion of existing marine protected areas, or maybe change in the type of regulation or activity that's allowed within the ones that already exist. There are a lot of different possibilities. But as of right now, we are not hearing anything about more being added. I do know that there is a proposed, it's the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. Was that the name of it, Robin? So that one is being proposed for the area. So that is, again, that national marine sanctuary that prohibits the gas and oil exploration and extraction. That one is proposed and in the works. That is not something that State Parks is working on so much, but there's a lot of information available online. But in my mind, with being a professional focused on marine conservation, I do recognize that not only is it important to have regulations and have these lines drawn on the map, but more importantly, it's about really helping people understand. So doing outreach and education events like this so that people are aware that these places even exist. Another important thing too is just ensuring people know that they can come and have fun and enjoy the ocean. When people build and have the ability to build that special relationship and connection with the ocean and with these beautiful habitats along our shoreline, the chances are they're going to be more likely to protect them. And especially in the face of climate change and with growing populations, we know that that's really important, is that education and outreach, so that our future generations know how they can manage and protect these special places to help keep them resilient into the future.
Thank you for answering that question. I'll just make a couple of comments too. You mentioned the Chumash National Marine Sanctuary. We will have a presentation about that coming up in December, so stay tuned for that. And then also a couple organizations that were mentioned in the contact list that Erika and Robin shared, such as Pacific Wildlife Care, Marine Mammal Center, CalTIP. Those are all, thank you for sharing that, Erika. Those are, we've featured a lot of these organizations in past virtual mind walks as well. So you can learn more about them and what they do by visiting our website and watching those past recordings. And I'll give it a little bit more time for anyone to type their questions, but thank you so much, Robin and Erika, for joining us today. This was great information. I love how localized it is, because I know a lot of our attendees are watching from the Central Coast, although I did see some comments come through. One person is in Alberta, which is very cool. We had one person in San Diego. So thank you to everyone for joining this awesome presentation.